Okay, Brian Schubring, are you ready to record?
Yep, as ready as I can be.
As ready as you can be, as ready as you will be. Brian, this is exciting. This is an exciting moment in the history of Leadership Vision. We are finally doing a podcast.
Is this recording?
Yeah. Hey everybody, it's Nathan Freeberg. Welcome to the Leadership Vision podcast, the Leadership Vision video podcast. I think that's what it's called. We're going to be doing something a little bit different in 2021 here. We decided, since we're sitting behind screens all the time, let's just record the video along with the audio for this thing so that you can see who we are, see what we look like, see our facial expressions. It'll be a little bit more interactive and a little bit more dynamic. And so we're working on a bunch of those, but until then, I found this video, that clip you saw just a second ago, back in 2017. See, this was our original idea. This was the original plan, was to record all these things so it could be really interactive, and it just didn't work. I think we recorded 6 of them and realized with all the video editing, and it was only 4 years ago, but it's amazing how much that part of it has changed since then. And now thanks to COVID, we're behind screens and we're going to give it a go. So stay tuned, be watching for more of these videos. There's going to be links to our YouTube channel and some other stuff. This conversation that you're going to see here, or I guess listen to today, actually took place back in 2017 in downtown Minneapolis. Brian Schubring, our president and CEO, he and I were just chatting about what is Leadership Vision. It was supposed to be our very first episode. We never released it. And so we go through a little bit of the history, some of the kind of foundational beliefs and not the values. We covered those in our previous series just a couple weeks ago. But like, what were we trying to do? What was Leadership Vision? What was the intent of it? A few things have changed. It's no longer called the Strengths Finder. It's now Clifton Strengths. But a lot of what we do and what we have kind of developed into has stayed the same. We have different clients, different services, different products that we offer, but a lot of it is the same. So give this a watch, listen to it, give us some feedback. We'd love to hear maybe some topics that you want to hear us cover here in the new year. Send me an email, nathan@leadershipvisionconsulting.com. But until then, enjoy this conversation, this chat between Brian Schubring and myself. I was thinking it might be helpful, it might be fun to start by saying, like, this is what we're about. This is our vision. This is our motto. This is kind of the one thing that wakes us up in the morning, and then go back and dissect it and talk a little bit more about where we came from. So, Brian, tell us, what is Leadership Vision all about?
Leadership Vision, well, we are a consulting firm, and we are using StrengthsFinder to help people better understand themselves, number one. Secondly, we're using StrengthsFinder to help people better understand who they are in relationship to the teams that they're working on. We also have a very clear expectation of using a strengths-based approach to influence culture, the place within which the people exist, where people are working, where they're serving, as well as the place where teams are existing too. So there's always this threefold idea that is surrounding how we work with strengths and what it is we're trying to accomplish after we finish working with any of our clients.
Concisely, like, talk us through the genesis of Leadership Vision. Was it always StrengthsFinder? Was it always people, teams, and culture? Mm-hmm. Like, what was that like in the early day when no one even knew what the StrengthsFinder was?
Yeah, that's really what it was, because back in 1999 was when I landed at Bethel University to administer a grant that they had received. And it just so happened that the grant stipulated that we were to use some psychometrics and assessments to work on building a cohort for distance education. Someone within the Gallup organization heard that we had received money to go after a certain demographic, and they actually approached us and said, would you be interested in partnering around this new tool that we have called StrengthsFinder now?
And did you say yes, please?
No,
absolutely, or were you skeptical?
I thought they were going to ask me about some kind of survey or some polling thing, because they were Gallup, right?
Right, because that's what they ask you. Who are you going to vote for? How
Right.
much exercise did you get today?
Wasn't exactly what they were asking. I had never heard of StrengthsFinder. I didn't know that it had just been released. So part of the story is, in those very early days, we entered into a partnership with Gallup on the delivery of StrengthsFinder, and that began in 1999. And we were truly focused on students between the ages of 18 and 32 years old who we wanted to recruit for distance education. And it was through that effort that we began to be asked to talk more about strengths. you get asked to talk about strengths. People pay you some money. I cashed those checks, and the guy that was doing my taxes at the time kind of asked me, where's this money coming from? And I was like,
I don't know, all these speaking gigs.
Like, dude, can you believe it? I'm talking about strengths, and I'm getting paid for it. And he's like, you have to file differently. And so he recommended that we incorporate. So I'm an accidental
So Leadership Vision was founded out of simply an accounting situation, a desire to have better accounting practices.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we incorporated it in 2000, and then we specifically began to look for opportunities or just respond to the asks. And, for 7-8 years, we had that parallel relationship with Gallup, and then we decided at one point to really take a turn to emphasize more than just focusing on individuals. But for a long time, that individual focus was primarily what we were doing is just getting the language of strengths out, just having people go through an experience together with others. That was basically it. Back in the early days, we didn't know much more than that.
Didn't know there was much else. Do you remember when the shift happened from just focusing on individuals to, wait a second, this might be better in a team setting, or better when you have other people around you that are actually looking into who you are, who I am, how do we work together?
Yeah. I have a very team mentality to how I approach things because of my background with playing team sports my whole life. So I always had this team thing in the back of my mind. But the moment at which we really did make a turn to kind of go from the presentation on individual strengths to moving more towards this idea of how do we get this into teams and culture, that happened with some of the research that Gallup was doing prior to the release of the StrengthsFinder 2.0. And just the understanding that when you focus on your strengths, when you know what your top 5 strengths are, and then you do the best you can to engage in a strengths-based way, the level of improvement could go up 6, 7, 8%. And that statistic, to me, I had this response of, that's just not good enough for me. I think if I'm moving the needle by single percentage points, in the best case scenario, that's just not... It's not what I'm here for.
Right.
Then I had to step back and look at it and say, where do you want to go with this?
Sure.
And that's really where we began to say this idea of moving the word of strengths out. How do we take it from there to make it really sustainable or just engage people more? That's where the idea began to surface of, I think I need to build a team. So it's not just me and somebody else. We need to build a team of people to do this and also emphasize that team focus.
Yeah, because I think it's hard to teach people that team is important if you're a solo talking head up in the front of the room.
Yep.
And they'll say, well, where's your team, hotshot?
Who are you working with?
Right.
And I had no one I could say, it's these people.
Right.
So I just, that was a big shift for us.
So the objective of Leadership Vision, using StrengthsFinder work with people, teams, and cultures. And also that we believe that knowing your top 5 is only the beginning. Talk about that a little bit, because we were just talking about that's only the beginning and then it shifts into that team. Is there more to that statement than...
Yeah, there's a whole lot more to that statement.
I think one of the fun things, so this is our first podcast, we're going to be unpacking these in greater detail down the road. Today's just meant to be a snapshot, but talk a little bit more about that. Knowing your top 5 is only the beginning. And why I want to focus on that is because think of over the years, how many people have we talked to who are like, yeah, I took StrengthsFinder, I got my top 5. What else do I need to know? Those 5 words, that's great.
Which is funny because a lot of those conversations begin then with my response saying, well, what are your top 5? And they're like,
adapt
to something, or
adaptation.
Getting things, they have a hard time remembering the words.
I'm a talker. I like to talk. That's one of them, right?
In StrengthsFinder, the 34 strengths are representations of the talents, the very building blocks, the behaviors that go into what that strength actually looks like, what it sounds like, how it gets work done. So we know that just knowing your top 5 strengths, that's a great start. But how do you understand what that strength actually looks like to others? How is it that you use that strength? And that asks us to dive deeper into the understanding of the talents, those identifiable behaviors.
What's a talent? Now you're using terms I don't know.
Yep. Really? Things you don't know. Talent is the building blocks of strengths. Talents are the identifiable behaviors of how a person thinks, how they form relationships, how they get work done, how they influence other people. Those identifiable behaviors are the things that you actually see with the strengths.
Okay.
You don't see the name of the strength. You actually
Right.
see the behaviors of the strength. A lot of that information is embedded in some of the materials that Gallup has produced. A lot of the behavioral definitions that we are using for the strengths have come through the tens of thousands of interviews that we've done over the last 18 years.
In the last week?
In the last week, we've been working really hard. So that's where the talents are coming from. So we want to get into that level.
Okay.
And any engagement that we begin with somebody, whether it's an hour and a half or whether it's a long-term relationship over years, it always begins with a behavioral understanding of the strengths. That happens throughout every single level of what it is that we're delivering.
Sure. And that, I think, is different
Yep.
than maybe how other people are using this tool, looking at those behaviors and not just looking at the high level and saying, you have achiever, that means this.
Yeah.
It's getting into much more nuance than that, which we'll get into in much greater detail later in a different episode here. But
It's both,
It's
though.
important to note that.
Yep, you have to recognize. You need
Yes.
to recognize
Yeah.
what it is that a person is bringing the 5 strengths. And all we're asking is, well, then what does that look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? And all of those sensory reactions to strengths are then attached in some way to the behaviors of strength.
So why is that important? Like if I can say, oh, this is Brian's futuristic, when he does this behavior, that is his futuristic. Why is that helpful? Like why is it important for me to know that, to be able to recognize, oh, my team member is doing this thing where he's wandering around aimlessly looking at the sky. That's connected to this strength. It's behavior in that theme.
It's really important for us to begin to understand how an individual is approaching any given situation, what it is that is their unique perspective on how they're interpreting relationships, how they're perceiving that they're being understood, how I'm interacting with you. It's extremely important for us to know that kind of approach that a person is bringing to the table, because what that's also doing is then it's engaging some of our assumptions and presuppositions.
Good old assumptions, right?
You know, which tend to always get in the way, but they certainly can be great ways to understand each other better, is if we also name those assumptions.
There's a third statement here. A person's greatest potential lies in their ongoing exploration of talents. We've just talked about talents. What does that mean? How do you continue to explore your talents? How do you do that in a way that's really productive, that's helpful, that's, not done in a 2-hour workshop?
One of the things that we also
There's a lot in that statement.
There's a lot in that statement because we want to introduce this concept that strengths are dynamic. Strengths are not set. They are a dynamic entity of how it is that we can understand each other, meaning that those talents, the very elements that are coming together to bring strengths alive, those are changing, those are adapting, some are growing, some are recessing. And when we understand that there's a dynamic there, I think that we begin to give ourselves the room to understand each other in a greater way, because we give people the kind of flexibility that's what they need to be understood. When you focus on the behaviors, you're looking at how maybe 2 or 3 behaviors are working together. At another time, it could be 3 other behaviors that are working together, but they're still coming from the same strength.
Right. I think one of the biggest mistakes I've seen, personal example, this mistakes I've made is, with our team saying, oh, well, that's so-and-so's focus, that's so-and-so's activator, and just getting stuck in, well, that's why they're doing that, and not realizing like you said, the dynamic nature of how things might change, how when they're in a different setting it could change. And so, it's difficult, hard work, right? Like you're constantly having to learn and...
Well, correct.
Just like, any sort of relationship you're in, you have to learn like, well, what does that mean here? What does that mean there? And so I like how we've phrased this, the ongoing exploration of talents, not only in yourself, but in others.
Right, but in this example, the ongoing exploration starts with your naming the identification or saying, that's someone's focus. And then my first response to that is, well, what are you seeing? I want to ask, how did you get to that deduction? This is a person's strength of focus. And so by asking you, what do you see? I'm enticing you or inviting you to actually begin to name the behaviors that you're seeing,
right?
That you're associating with your understanding of focus. the ongoing exploration then occurs with you maybe then broadening your understanding of what the strength of focus actually is. And then when that can be attached to an individual, then that can open up a whole gateway of ways to better relate to someone, to better understand someone, how we can use strengths as a way to inform how we partner with each other, and when are the different appropriate partnerships that we should or should not be involved in. Because there are times when, depending on whatever it is we're working on, certain people maybe are better partnered together than others.
Right. Which is an ongoing process as well. It's a whole nother thing.
Conversation involving individuals and teams.
But it's good.
Yep.
So our fourth statement here is, it is our objective to shape culture that intentionally aligns people around a strengths philosophy.
Right. When you wonder what's going on in the control room of things, we may be involved in a 90-minute engagement somewhere. We could be involved in an all-day. And people often ask us what is it that you're going for here? And it's captured in this statement. Our objective is to shape the culture, for a culture to begin to entertain the possibility of taking a strengths-based approach to how it is that they work with their people, how it is that they're teaming, and actually the environment that they're investing in to create the kind of health that they're looking for. And I just think that we're coming to the table with that objective in mind. So we're never simply focusing only on one event or this one person, whatever it is. There's always something greater that's going on there, because we also know that the long-term sustainability comes through the organization's ability to shape culture that can support individuals.
So does that mean that we don't come and do the 60 to 90 minute presentation? Does that mean that we don't come and work with individuals in a coaching level? How does that impact the other stuff that we do? If our objective is to shape culture, what does that mean for those, I'll call them one-offs?
Well, whether it's a one-off or if it's simply a beginning, we're looking at it as the start of a pathway. And I think it's really important that we understand the direction that we're going. We are going in a direction to have an influence on culture. And I look at the different operational or the different offerings that we have. The different professional services are merely stepping stones to get there. But each of those stepping stones, as they're laid in front of each other, are having an effect on the culture.
Right. So even just exposure to strengths, buying the book, taking the assessment, getting your codes back, it increases self-awareness and everything else by X percentage. Even just that, I think that we would encourage people to do. If that's all that you can do, right? But our end goal isn't simply, these 5 words attached to your name. It's much bigger than that.
Oh, it is. But it all begins with the same thing.
Right.
We're introducing a common language. And we also know through our own research and research that we're using to support the work that we're doing, that when you introduce a common language, that's one of the key elements to shaping culture.
Sure.
And in the work that we do, we have a vocabulary that we use, which is the introduction of a language. We are also obviously using the language of strengths as a common language for people to gather around. That's just the beginning. So that language is there to seed it out. We know that there is a way to increase engagement, productivity, personal satisfaction just through this idea of common language. There are many other things that can be layered on that, but that's always part of the initial introduction to strengths is here's this common language that we have.
When you're learning anything new, it's just learning the language and understanding those different things, I think, is the greatest barrier for people to overcome. You think about people who are getting into wine or beer or technology or sports, they feel so out of it because they don't know that language. Once you understand it, you may not be anywhere close to an expert, or once you know that language, you might not be an expert, at least you understand a little bit more of what's going on. I think that's the same with strengths. Until it feels like this huge, mountain you can't climb, but you know the language, and now you're like, okay, maybe it's starting to make a little bit sense, and without that initial exposure, there's no way to get that.
Part of that is, and I say this all the time, I believe this for years, if through the introduction of the language of strengths, if I simply can create a pause in someone's interaction with somebody else, where they may be working with someone and the work is difficult, or it could even be frustrating. If I can cause someone to begin to think, is that a strength? Like they're taking conflictual or challenging
Sure.
or even great collaboration. And then for someone to turn that corner and say, I wonder if that's an area of someone's excellence, of someone's expertise, then I think that we're beginning to move the needle more than what people actually realize. That's one of the pauses that I'm always working for, is that questioning, whether that's with a coworker or a family member, or just simply observing someone who's like in their zone and they're totally on, things are going right. And you're thinking, is there something that reflects a strength in there? Like, what am I actually seeing?
I think it also helps to reframe them, just the way that we think about people, instead of being like, that's annoying what they're doing, to think of more like, I wonder what strength is at work there. And just because it's different than you are, it kind of helps, talk about positive intent a lot. And assuming positive intent, I think it can even just reframe the way that we interact with people. Yeah. Even at the most basic level.
I want to help shift the focus.
Right.
And we have a phrase that's part of the language that we bring, and we say there's a beauty and brilliance to everybody. And if I just introduce that, like there's a beauty and brilliance with people, and just to cause someone to pause and just wonder what's beautiful about that person, what's the brilliance that they bring. And then on the other hand, we give them this language of strengths, and we give them a lens through which they begin to interpret that beauty and brilliance. Just those two things now that can come together to create a stronger bond between people. It's saying somebody has something to offer that's unique and distinct from me. There's a beauty and a brilliance to them that no one else possesses. Right. And then you kind of then ask yourself, then how can I help make that more beautiful?
Right. How can you elevate
more
that?
Brilliant? Yeah. Yes, and help find a place where that person is best fit for that beauty and brilliance, not only be appreciated, but to be understood.
Yeah. Everybody wants to be understood, right?
Everybody does.
We have a deep desire to have people understand and know who we are and where we're coming from. I mean, how many conflicts are just purely based on misunderstanding?
Few,
just a couple.
It's rare to find that. But what do you do?
That never happens.
Yeah, what do you do?
Yeah, exactly. Our fifth statement here, and we've kind of been talking all about this, but I just love the way that we have this so concisely written, is that we believe that ultimately it is within a team where people gain insight into others while sharpening their own strengths, potential, capacity, and influence.
Yeah. We encourage everyone who is asking us to work with them to bring a functional team to the table. So we believe that from the first presentation throughout whatever process someone chooses to work with us, that there is a functional team that's coming together. Functional team meaning a team that's actually working on some shared objectives, or there's something organizationally that brings these people together on a regular basis. We believe that it's within that small grouping, that small ensemble, where you begin to know people in a way that you couldn't know, even if you're sitting next to someone.
Even if you've known them for years.
Knowing them for years, but not on a functional team. We believe that in this environment where there's a functional team, there is a way that you can work off each other and see things in yourself and in someone else that you may not see in any other context, because you're repeatedly with that person day after day. We believe that in those relationships, there's a mirror that's held back up to you. You can see yourself more clearly.
Sometimes I hate that mirror.
But that mirror is a helpful mirror.
It is a helpful mirror, and especially if you're willing and open to see what's reflected.
Yeah, I'll keep holding the mirror up
too.
Thank
you. I appreciate that. Likewise.
Yes. But we believe that there's also an imbalance to this too. No matter how much I gain in my understanding of you, we believe that there's more to understand in ourselves through the interaction with someone else. That's why we say that within a team context, if you're sharing the language of strengths, if you share common experiences on the work that you're doing, it's within that context that, if you're willing, you can have a better understanding of what are my true capacities. Where is it that I need to be more dialed in because I have more potential over here? And also we believe that it's within the team context that you can begin to truly understand with accuracy your influence, how you influence other people. We think that there is a safety to teams. There's a protection that can happen there, because we also know that within that team construct, within that small group, that we can learn things there that can at some point be more influential out towards the culture. Because we know that within that team, you can practice things there that you wouldn't be able to try somewhere else.
You can take risks.
You can take
in
risks
that setting
there.
that you might not be able to in
Yep.
another one. Yeah.
Yep. And if there's a mutual respect on that team, you know you're all kind of doing the same thing. You're helping each other out developmentally. Then there's a way that I can help you and that you can help me become more effective in what it is that we're trying to do as team members, as individuals, and as influencers beyond that team structure. We really believe there's something catalytic that happens when a team is focused on understanding each other and aligning that understanding towards how can we work together towards a common goal. There's something that's happening there. We spend a lot of time working with teams in brief sessions.
And on our own team.
And on our own
In
team.
our own team.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
I want to read this statement again because I think it's powerful. So Leadership Vision uses StrengthsFinder to work with people, teams, and culture. We believe that knowing your top 5 strengths is only the beginning, and a person's greatest potential lies in their ongoing exploration of talents. It's our objective to shape culture that intentionally aligns people around a strengths philosophy. We believe that ultimately it is within a team where people gain insight into others while sharpening their own strengths, potential, capacity, and influence. So, Brian, as we close this out here, I'm curious. So I want to end these by giving something away. Some knowledge, wisdom. We're not going to raffle off a car or anything. This isn't Oprah. This is hard. Like, this is difficult. This isn't something you can just do in an hour and 2 hours. What do you think in all of your years doing this how do you start is what I'm going to ask. So what I'm thinking of is, as people are listening to this wondering, this sounds great. I love that idea. Our team needs that, but maybe buy-in is difficult. Maybe it's hard to get people excited about this. What would be your advice to people on how to start this? And I'm even thinking hell, just hire us and we'll do it for you. But there's a whole other process of even getting people excited about doing this work, regardless of who might come in and do it for you or if you do it for self. So what would be your best piece of advice, your free advice of how do you get people excited about even entering into this difficult work?
I think a very easy way to begin to engage this, wherever you're at, whatever your interest is, if it's just like an icebreaker thing, or if you're really trying to start a conversation on building a strengths platform, take your strengths, have each person read through the 5 descriptive paragraphs on what those strengths are. Then here's a simple assignment. Choose one strength, the one you probably know the best, and just tell a story on how that strength is seen by you or is used by you, or just tell a story of why it is that you connected with that strength so strongly. Because we know this too. Sharing a story is a great way to remember what it is that someone's trying to communicate. It adds a deeper level of meaning. And then you're not getting into explain this strength and we go on the table, but it's sharing something that you know personally. You know yourself. You know your own story. Tell a story about how you see that strength working in your life on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Vision podcast, where we share our expertise in the discovery, practice, and implementation of a strengths-based approach to people, teams, and culture. For more resources about developing your strengths, the strengths of your team, or the strengths of your entire organization, click the link in the show notes or visit us on the web at leadershipvisionconsulting.com. If you found value from this episode, we'd appreciate it if you would subscribe to us on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, Google Podcast, Stitcher, and pretty much anywhere you can get podcasts. We're also on YouTube now, so go check that out. Please share this episode or any of our other resources with anyone you think might benefit from going deeper into our strengths-based approach to individual, team, and organizational development. I'm Nathan Freeberg, and on behalf of our entire team, thanks for listening.